Marissa Taylor never saw it coming, and Alina Harris knew exactly when it would happen. One trusted too easily, the other betrayed without hesitation. What began as a friendship built on laughter and loyalty ended with a single text and a blood-stained sidewalk. This is the chilling true story of how a 20-year-old woman was set up by the one person she called her real friend, all for revenge that was never hers to fear. Marissa Taylor was the kind of girl who lit up every room she walked into. At just 20 years old, she had already built a reputation for being kind, ambitious, and reliable. She balanced college classes with a part-time job at a local law office, determined to build a future for herself. She didn't come from money, but she never let that define her. She focused on her goals and stayed away from drama. Her world revolved around school, her family, and most importantly, her closest friend, Alina Harris. Marissa and Alina had been best friends since high school. From the outside, their friendship looked perfect. They were inseparable, taking selfies at every outing, tagging each other in posts, and planning their futures together. Their bond seemed unbreakable. They had even talked about renting an apartment once they both had stable jobs. Alina was the more spontaneous of the two, often skipping class or showing up late, but Marissa always covered for her. People often said that Marissa kept Alina grounded, and in return, Alina brought out Marissa's more adventurous side. It seemed like a balanced friendship, one full of loyalty, history, and love, but as time passed, small differences began to grow into bigger gaps. While Marissa focused on her education and stayed out of trouble, Alina began drifting in another direction. She stopped attending classes regularly and started hanging out with people who had reputations that made Marissa uncomfortable. Marissa tried not to judge, but she was worried. Their late-night talks became less frequent. Alina would cancel plans without warning, and when they did meet up, she seemed distant and distracted. The biggest shift came when Alina started dating Darnell Price. He was older, mysterious, and well-known in the neighborhood for all the wrong reasons. Rumors tied him to drug activity and petty crime, but Alina didn't seem to care. She was drawn to him, and Marissa could see it changing her. At first, she tried to be supportive, but after hearing whispers about Darnell's past, she couldn't stay quiet. Marissa expressed her concerns gently, but Alina didn't take it well. She accused Marissa of being judgmental and controlling, and from that moment on, things were never the same between them. Marissa didn't know how deeply Darnell was already influencing Alina. What she saw as harmless warnings were slowly being twisted into something darker in Darnell's mind. He saw Marissa as a threat not just to his relationship, but to his reputation. And Alina, caught between the loyalty of a lifelong friend and the intoxicating pull of a dangerous man, started to shift her loyalty. What began as a small wedge between two friends would soon grow into a deadly rift. And Marissa, trusting and unaware, continued to believe that despite everything, Alina would never turn on her. She had no idea that the person she once called her sister would become the one to lead her straight into danger. Darnell Price had always lived in the shadows of the city. He was the type of man who never stayed in one place too long, never trusted too deeply, and always had something to hide. 2 years before Marissa Taylor's murder, his older brother, Lamar, had been arrested in a drug sting that took out several people from their neighborhood. It happened fast, too fast, in Darnell's opinion. Someone had tipped off the police, and Darnell became obsessed with finding out who. His brother's arrest had cost their family respect, money, and control. Darnell took it personally, and in his mind, someone needed to pay. Rumors swirled for months about the sting operation. People whispered that someone from the inside had spoken to the cops, someone young, clean-cut, and close enough to know what Lamar was doing. That rumor eventually settled on Marissa Taylor. She didn't have any criminal ties, but she had a part-time job at a law office that handled small legal cases for the city, and sometimes she filed paperwork at the local precinct. That small connection was enough for people like Darnell to make assumptions. He didn't have proof, but he didn't need it. His hatred grew quietly and steadily until revenge became the only thing he could think about. When Alina Harris started dating Darnell, he saw an opportunity. At first, he played it cool, charming, protective, even affectionate. Alina had never been treated like that before, and she fell fast. But as their relationship deepened, Darnell began to ask questions. Who did Alina hang out with? Who did she trust the most? Where did her friends work? What did they know? Slowly, the focus shifted to Marissa. He asked how often they talked, where she worked, who she talked to at her job. Alina answered without suspicion at first, believing it was all harmless curiosity, but Darnell began to press harder. He brought up Lamar's arrest, planting the idea that Marissa could have been the one to talk. Alina laughed it off at first, saying Marissa would never do something like that. But Darnell didn't let it go. Night after night, he chipped away at her certainty, framing Marissa as someone fake, someone who might smile to your face but sell you out behind your back. He played on Alina's insecurities and jealousy. He reminded her how Marissa always acted like she knew better, always warned her about the people she dated, always tried to control her life. And slowly, Alina began to see her best friend through a different lens. The seed had been planted. Darnell convinced Alina that if Marissa had betrayed his family, there would never be peace until she paid for it. He never told her exactly what he planned to do. He only asked for one thing: help him get close. All he needed was to know where Marissa would be, when she would be alone, and what she would be wearing. Alina, torn between fear, love, and loyalty, gave him everything he asked for. She told herself it was just information. She had no idea that Darnell had already decided that Marissa wouldn't survive. On the evening of March 14th, the weather was cold but calm. The streets were quiet, the kind of stillness that made things feel safe. Marissa had just finished a long shift at the law office and was about to head home when she received a message from Alina. It read like a cry for help. Alina said she needed to talk, that things with Darnell were getting out of control, and she didn't know who else to turn to. Marissa hesitated for a moment. Their friendship had been strained for months, and she hadn't seen Alina in person for a while. But despite everything, she still cared. She replied quickly, offering to meet her at a small coffee shop they used to go to in high school. They met just after 9:30 p.m. Marissa was tired but alert, while Alina appeared nervous and shaky. She kept looking at her phone, avoiding eye contact, and speaking in a low, shaky voice. She told Marissa she was scared of Darnell, that he had become controlling, and that she was thinking about leaving him. Marissa listened carefully, offering support and advice, completely unaware that the entire conversation was a setup. Every word spoken was just a distraction, something to fill the time until the plan was in motion. What Marissa couldn't see was that Darnell was already nearby, sitting in a parked car just across the street. Alina had texted him the moment they sat down, "She's here." After about 20 minutes, they left the coffee shop and began walking toward Marissa's car, which was parked in a dimly lit area behind the building. The parking lot was almost empty. Marissa didn't notice anything strange. She didn't flinch when she heard footsteps behind her. But Alina did. She stepped to the side, pretending to tie her shoe, and let the moment unfold. A hooded figure came out of the shadows without a word. Marissa turned around too late. The attack was quick, brutal, and silent. She was stabbed several times in the chest and abdomen. There were no screams, just the sound of scuffling feet and the heavy breaths of a man who had done this before. Alina stood frozen for a few seconds before letting out a loud scream. She dropped to her knees, crying, and called 911. Her voice trembled as she told the operator that a man had attacked her friend out of nowhere. She described the attacker as tall, wearing dark clothes, and running toward the alley. First responders Arrived within minutes, finding Marissa unconscious and bleeding heavily. Alina sobbed uncontrollably, repeating that she didn't know who would do such a thing. She clung to Roll as the shocked friend, never letting on that she had helped. Planned the entire night. Marissa was rushed to the hospital but pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The news of her death hit the community hard. Social media filled with pictures, memories, and heartbreak. No one suspected Alina. Not yet. To everyone else, she was the grieving best friend. But the truth was already hidden in the digital trail she had left behind, a trail investigators would soon begin to follow. The morning after Marissa's death, grief swept through the campus and the community like a wave. Vigils were organized. Photos circulated online, and friends shared memories of her laughter, her kindness, her future. Alina played the part of the grieving best friend flawlessly. She posted long emotional messages, shared their old photos, and even spoke at a small memorial service arranged by classmates. Her tears looked real. Her voice shook with pain. But behind the scenes, detectives were already growing suspicious. Something in her story didn't sit right. Detectives reviewed the surveillance footage from the cafe and surrounding businesses. A security camera across the street had a clear angle of Marissa and Alina leaving the cafe together. It also showed a man in a dark hoodie stepping out from between two parked cars minutes later. That footage confirmed the attack, but there was a problem. It showed Alina pulling out her phone just seconds before the man appeared, despite claiming that her phone was in her pocket the entire time. Investigators pulled her phone records and discovered a brief message had been sent at 10:17 p.m., moments before the attack, a simple one-word text to Darnell, "Now." That one message unraveled everything. From there, detectives obtained a warrant to search Alina's phone in full. The messages between her and Darnell told a much darker story than she had shared. For weeks before the murder, they had exchanged dozens of texts discussing Marissa's routines, shifts at work, and even what she typically wore on certain days. One message stood out: "She's always by herself after work on Thursdays. We could do it then." Alina had deleted it, but investigators recovered it from her cloud backup. The evidence was stacking quickly. Meanwhile, Darnell had vanished. After the night of the murder, he stopped answering calls and disappeared from his usual hangouts. It took police 3 days to find him, pulled over during a routine traffic stop in a different part of town. He was driving a borrowed car, acting nervous. Inside the vehicle, officers found a small backpack. Inside it was Marissa's phone, partially cleaned but still stained with blood. Forensics later confirmed it matched her DNA. Under interrogation, Darnell refused to speak, but with the physical evidence in hand, both he and Alina were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy. News of the arrests shocked everyone who had believed Alina's story. Friends who once comforted her now felt betrayed. At the police station, she broke down during questioning. She admitted she had given Darnell information but insisted she never meant for Marissa to die. She claimed she thought it was just going to be a scare, something to intimidate her. But the messages told a different story, one of planning, motive, and silence. Detectives now saw the full picture. Marissa's killer hadn't been a stranger in the shadows. He had been summoned. And the person who lit the fuse was the very friend Marissa trusted most. The courtroom was packed on the day the trial began. Reporters lined the steps, cameras pointed at the doors, and murmurs echoed as people whispered about the girl who betrayed her best friend. Alina Harris walked in wearing a plain blouse and slacks, her hair tied back, looking nothing like the confident, outgoing girl from social media. Across the aisle sat Marissa Taylor's parents, holding hands tightly, staring ahead in silence. The pain in their eyes never left, not through the opening statements, not through the testimonies, not even during the most damning evidence. Prosecutors painted a clear, chilling picture. Alina hadn't just been a passive participant, she was the one who set the plan in motion. Over a span of weeks, she gave Darnell every piece of information he needed to find Marissa at her most vulnerable. The texts between them were presented in court, showing how Alina mapped out Marissa's habits, work schedule, and locations. One message included an exact time and place, reading, "She finishes around 9. We can meet her near the old coffee spot." That line silenced the courtroom. There was no longer any doubt about intent. Darnell, tried separately, refused to testify and maintained his silence. But the evidence found in his possession, including Marissa's blooded phone and DNA traces on the weapon, left little to argue. Witnesses testified to his threats in the weeks leading up to the murder, many saying he believed someone had snitched on his brother. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Alina's defense tried to argue that she was manipulated, that she feared Darnell and never believed he would follow through with violence. They claimed she was in too deep, a victim of emotional control and pressure. But prosecutors countered with cold facts. She never warned Marissa, never told her to be careful, and never tried to stop the plan. Her tears came too late. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Alina was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. As the judge read the verdict, she collapsed in her seat, crying into her hands. Marissa's parents didn't move. Their faces remained frozen in quiet grief, knowing justice had come, but too late to save their daughter. In the months that followed, Marissa's story sparked conversations across the country. Her parents started a foundation in her name to raise awareness about toxic friendships, emotional manipulation, and betrayal. They visited schools, sharing her story and urging young people to recognize when someone close might be a danger in disguise. What haunted many was not just the brutality of the act, but the simplicity of how it happened. Marissa had trusted the wrong person. She didn't see the warning signs. She believed her friend would never harm her. In the end, it wasn't a stranger who ended her life, it was someone who had once called her family.